Hello everybody and welcome back to Rock and Roll Rugby, where we're doing another match preview. It's Wales versus Fiji this weekend down at the Principality Stadium on Sunday, Remembrance Sunday, and it promises to be a mouth-watering clash, and you've got to say at this point it is a must-win game for Wales. But I'm not alone. As always, I am joined by my very good friend Brandon. Brandon, how are you doing, buddy? Are you well?
Yeah, I'm very well. Looking forward to this one. Lots of memories over the years of playing Fiji. Let's try not to mention 2007 too much, but looking forward to this game and looking forward to this chat as well.
Yeah, and it promises to be a really, really good game. Fiji got their first game under their belts last week against a Spanish team, managed to put 48 points on them in the end and brought off some of the big names that we'll talk about in just a bit. But looking into it, we're going to look at the teams this evening. We're going to look at the players that we think are going to be ones to watch. And then obviously we're going to make our predictions. Hopefully we're going to be a little bit more positive this week. But Wayne Pivac was bold, went out early this week and named his side on Tuesday lunchtime. And we're going to go through that team now. Just have a look who he selected to take on the Fijians this weekend. So, starting from the front row, it's a retained front row from the South African game of Rhys Carey, Ryan Elias and Thomas Francis. The second row partnership is also retained, with Will Rowlands partnering up with Adam Beard. Ellis Jenkins captains the side from number 6, and in my opinion, and we'll ask Brandon's in a second, rightly so, alongside Thomas Youngs, recently signed back with Cardiff Rugby. That means that Tame Basham moves across to number 8. In at 9 is Kieran Hardy, first game of the autumn for him, first involvement for him this autumn, alongside Dan Biggar, the experienced 10, who will be looking to guide this Welsh team on Saturday. In the midfield, it's Johnny Williams returning to the side after the New Zealand game, and a move into the centre for Josh Adams, who will take that 13 jersey from the captain, Jonathan Davis. Leaving a back three of Louis Rees-Zammit, Alex Cuthbert, of all people, on the wing, and Liam Williams at fullback, leaving a bench of Bradley Roberts, Gareth Thomas for the Ospreys, looking to make his first appearance this autumn, Will Griff-John, Christ Chunza, who I cannot wait to see get on the pitch Saturday, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Seb Davis is back row cover, leaving back replacements of Thomas Williams, Callum Sheedy and Nick Tompkins. It was an interesting selection, Brandon. Firstly, very early on, Pivac doesn't tend to name his side until sort of 48 hours before the game. But when you saw that team, what were your initial reactions and your initial thoughts on the players that have been selected for this Sunday's match?
I think the big thing that hit me was it felt like a very pre-planned squad, as if Pivac knew coming into this autumn, this is the team that's going to go out and play against Fiji. A lot of interesting selections in there. Interesting to see that he's gone with the same front row, although the Fijians, we wouldn't expect them to give us as much of a challenge in the set pieces. It is somewhere where we have struggled a little bit this year. Interested that Biggar stays at 10. Maybe you could have looked at someone like a Priestland, Sheedy or someone like that to have come in. And then heading over to the rest of the backs, we're going to talk about it. Josh Adams in the centre. A few people have mentioned that could be a potential place for him to play over the next few years. And Alex Cuthbert back on the wing, a long time, 4 years, I believe it is, since we've seen him play in the Red of Wales. So fascinated to see how this team gels. A lot of players who won't have played together, so it might be a little bit all over the place in some areas. But I'm pretty confident this team is strong enough to beat Fiji.
Yeah, I think the one thing you've got to say is there's a lot of experience in there. The front five now. They've played against the world champions last week. Yeah, not the most successful afternoon in terms of the scrum, but the line-out was far better. And I think our line-out defence as well was so much better. Obviously, the last try came from a driving maul, but up to that point, the main weapon that South Africa used to gain that sort of dominance in the game, we managed to distill it to the best of our abilities, and we just fell off at the last stage. But one thing I do want to talk to you about is we know what Fiji will bring. We know they bring this, a sort of Harlem Globe style rugby that they're going to play. They love to throw the ball around, carry in one hand, offloads off the deck. How much do you think this Welsh team will want to keep the game structured for as long as possible on Sunday?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because we know what Pivac wants to do. We know he wants to throw the ball about, but doing that against this Fijian side is recipe for disaster. If the game gets loose, it gets open. That's what Fiji want. They want in broken play because, of course, the main sport in Fiji is sevens, and the way they play sevens is it's open, it's exciting. You're offloading all the time. You're trying off ridiculous offloads. And a lot of the boys who have come in for Fiji have also played sevens. I think for Wales, it's really important that we keep it tight, that we don't give the Fijians a loose possession. I don't think kicking to them as such is an issue. I just think if we're sloppy with our passing, that could be a massive issue. I do think we'll look to keep it tight, potentially why Bigger has been given the nod at 10, just to ensure that he can control that game. And you look in the pack as well, there's some big lads in there who will also look to control the game. So I think we will look to do that. And but we have to be very careful. This Fijian side, they may not be where they were at when they beat France in Paris for the first time, but they are a very good side. And Spain, okay, it's Spain, but they are certainly an up and coming nation who'll be looking to try and qualify for the 2023 Rugby World Cup, and they comfortably put them away in Madrid. So I'm expecting a tough game for sure.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the team, which we'll do in just a second, Fiji have definitely come to play. Their best players, they're in the starting lineup, and I think Fiji is going through a sort of a revolution again now, where they're starting to build again towards the 2023 World Cup. Vern Cotter at the helm, and recently you mentioned sevens quite a bit there, but Gareth Baber has been brought into the coaching setup as well. So there will be that sort of, I think, that sort of like sprinkling of seven stardust on the team. But let's have a look at the Fijian team. And disclaimer, apologies. Before I start this, Brandon threw me under the bus a big time with this. He was like, yes, no problem, Ben. You can do the preview game for this week. And then I saw the names on this team sheet and I thought, Valley's lad trying these. But I will give it my best shot. I know quite a few, but let's take a look at it anyway. So, starting at fullback, we have Setareki Tuikuvu. On the wings, we have the massive Joshua Tuisova and Eroni Sau. The biggest calves I've ever seen on a back with Joshua Tuisova. In the centres, we've got Wasea Nayakalevu, who will captain the side alongside Vilamoni Botiu. At halfbacks, we've got Ben Volavola and Frank Lamani, which leaves then the pack of Penny Ravai, Sam Matavesi and Misake Doge, who's recently signed for the Newport Gwent Dragons and has made quite an impression at there. I think he's played almost every game down at Rodney Parade so far this season. In the second row, you have Api Ratuniarawa and Timo Mayana Vanua, leaving a back row of Albert Tuisui, Mesalame Kunavula and Vilame Mata. On the replacements bench, we've got Zuriel Togitama, Eroni Maui, Leroy Atalifo, Tivai Ratuva, Matisevi Dakua, Mikolai Matualu, who we know from his time with Glasgow, and the other back replacements then, Apisai Nakalevu and Aminasi Tuyamba. Wow.
Fair play.
But yeah, looking at that side, there's lots of players that stand out that we know from all around Europe, and that's one thing I wanted to start on before we obviously go into looking at individual players and looking at how we think Fiji is going to play. Obviously, the big news coming out over the last few months is that Fiji will have a representative side within the Super Rugby next year. Okay, the Drua, as they called, will be taking up a place within the Super Rugby sort of setup next year. How important do you think that is for Fijian rugby, Brandon? Because obviously a lot of the players that they were hoping for have committed their future to the Drua. To see that sort of level of rugby growing within Fiji, how important do you think that is, especially for the national team moving forward?
It's massive, absolutely massive. I've read many articles over the years, listened to many podcasts over the years on this situation. And the simple reality is that clubs in France and clubs in England could just offer more for these players to come and play for them. And then outside then of the international window, they wouldn't be able to be released, or even during the international window, it made more financial sense for them to stay with their club than to play for their nation. To have a team in Fiji is massive, not only for rugby, but for the country in general. It'll provide a big revenue stream. I mean, having the Chiefs coming over, having the Highlanders coming over is going to be absolutely huge. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity for young Fijian players who are coming through thinking, actually, I can stay in Fiji. I don't have to go to New Zealand. I don't have to go to Australia to play professional rugby and then end up becoming a Wallaby or an All Black. I can stay in Fiji. I can progress. It's going to be a challenge for them to get it right. They need to get the right people in place. They need to get the right members of staff, the right directors involved. They need to get the right coaches involved. It's going to be a long-term project, but it's certainly the right thing. And I'm really excited to see what they can do. I wouldn't expect them to be overly competitive in the first year, but again, it's a process, and I think they'll understand that. So it's huge for rugby in Fiji, and I'm hopeful that we'll see something similar happening with countries like Georgia and Romania, where potentially teams could join the URC, but that's another debate.
Yeah, and I think the big thing you said there is that sort of giving the players within Fiji that opportunity to represent their nation. There's been a lot of debate around the world recently with the residency rule changing. Obviously, Malakai Fekitoa gained some caps for New Zealand and is now qualified to play for Tonga through the residency rule. It's a massive, massive thing. And I think to have these players available to play the best teams in the world, obviously warm up against Spain last week, but they've got bigger games to come up. They've got bigger challenges they'll face. And they'll be relishing this opportunity against this Welsh side on the weekend. We talk about some of the individual names, and we'll talk about some of the ones to watch in just a second there. But these players, like they said, they're playing in the best clubs in France. They're playing in the best clubs in England. And they know how to play rugby at the top level, especially one of the players we'll mention in a second. A lot of them play alongside some of the players within this Welsh setup. So it's going to be a massive step up for them, obviously, to take on Wales, Six Nations champions, at the Principality Stadium on Sunday. I know it's not going to be a full house. We've seen a lot of tickets that are still available over the last few days. But it's still going to be a really big event for those Fijian players. And, it puts them on the map as well. Players putting their hands up and wanting to be involved in future decisions, whether it's going back to Fiji to play for the Drua or whether it's to be picked up by other bigger sides within England and France. So we're going to go in now and we're going to stick with Fiji for the time being, just as we've been talking about them now. I've picked out two of my players to watch in this game for very, very different reasons. One far more technical than the other. So I'm going to start off with this man here, Api Ratunirawa. Vice captain, he will be on Sunday. And he plays his rugby down at Northampton Saints at the minute. So obviously he has a very good connection with Dan Biggar. Now, the reason I've highlighted this individual is that I read the press conference that was released when the side was named. And he is their line-out captain, which in games gone by has been a difficulty for Wales to get quite right. We had much more success against South Africa on Saturday last week. I think that was down to a little bit more sympathy from the throwers, sympathy from the calls that they were making, making sure that we were in the right places at the right times before we made those line-out calls. But how important do you think it's going to be for Fiji to try and look at that, to think, Wales are getting better, but they're not quite there yet? How important do you think this man is going to be to try and disrupt that set-piece ball for Wales?
It's going to be very important for them. I think Fiji will be looking to capitalise on the mistakes that we make. If our line-out isn't on point and they get a quick ball, we're not set to be defending, we're set to be attacking. And they will absolutely love that. And we're going to talk about another guy in a second who will absolutely lap that up and will absolutely love that if that's the case. I did think last week we went back to basics with the line out. There wasn't anything silly, very, very basic. And sometimes I feel like we do try and complicate things a little bit too much. And I think this week, having that continuity with Ryan Elias at hooker, I know it's not always down to hooker with the line out, but having that continuity helps them to build those calls and that understanding of one another. But he is going to be really important for them. He's been obviously playing in the Prem with Northampton. We'll know, of course, Dan Biggar pretty well. And I'm sure there'll be a few words said between each other, but I'm sure they'll buy a pint at the end for one another. But I do think it's going to be a fascinating game for him. And I expect him to be just trying to be a menace in the line-out, in the maul, if we look to use that. And yeah, if they can get that foothold in the game at our line-out, then it could be a difficult afternoon for us.
Yeah, and we talk about it obviously with a Welsh spin on it, of how this could affect our game. And you're quite right, that he's going to want to try and disrupt as much ball as he can on Sunday, make life difficult for Wales, because without our set piece, we go to plan B. And sometimes, as we've seen against New Zealand and South Africa, plan B doesn't tend to be the most structured for us. And if that's the case, Fiji are definitely going to capitalise. So, he'll be a presence around the field as well. He's one of Northampton's main ball carriers. And I just think he's one of those players that could really spark this Fijian side into life. A couple of big carries, a couple of big hits, a line-out steal here or there. And suddenly Wales are left questioning themselves how they get back into the game or how they get a foothold in the game. Another guy that we're going to mention for Fiji now, last week we saw that Wales were exploited once or twice in the wide outside channels. We concentrate on that sort of narrow defence, make sure that we put lots of pressure on the ball carriers in midfield and try and dominate that space on the game line. But there were some spaces that were left on the wide outside. And if we leave those on Sunday, we've got this man to worry about, Joshua Tuisova. This guy is, every time I watch him play, he's either going to score a try, set one up, or he's going to sit someone down, an absolute treat. I think, since the days of Jonah Lomu, I don't think I've seen a winger who likes to seek the contact as much as Tuisova does. His first step, rather than on the outside, is usually forward, and he's looking to bring the men onto him to try and tackle him. Big job for Louis Rees-Zammit on the weekend to man mark him out of the game. But, Brandon, how do you think this man could have an influence on the game on Sunday afternoon?
He's a frightening player to come against. Not only is he powerful, he's quick. He's very comfortable with ball in hand. Any broken play, if he gets it in hand and he's running at poor Thomas Francis or Ryan Elias or someone like that, I do not want to see that. So we'll have to watch him very closely. He's obviously playing out in France with Lyon, previously with Toulon, has a sevens background. He's won gold with Fiji as well. So he's very, very experienced at the international stage. And we're going to have to be so careful of how we look to compete at the breakdown, especially I feel like if we get sucked in at the breakdown, they get those spaces out wide. That could be a massive issue. And, Ben Volavola at 10 is very comfortable to kick the ball crossfield. That option will always be there. And, for pace, it'd be interesting, Louis Rees-Zammit against him for pace. But for physicality, there's just no question about it who's winning that battle. And he is their star man. They'll look to get him the ball. And he will run from anywhere. If he spots a gap, he'll just go for it. And we have to be really wary of that on Sunday. And he is the X-Factor player, isn't he? And I'm excited to see him, but I hope he doesn't have that good a game.
I was just going to say the same thing. He's one of those players that you think, I really hope he doesn't do too much damage against us. But at the same time, when he does what he does, you can only just sit back and admire how good it is, And you've got him on the one wing, and you've got Ironi Sow on the other wing, a player who I've loved watching over the last couple of seasons for Edinburgh. He's one of those players that just sort of explodes off the floor. He's like he's put down, but unless that man is on top of him, he's back up, he's going again. And I really like the way that this back three for Fiji is shaping up. And like you said, a big moment, if he gets a bump off and makes, 10, 15 yards up the wing, even if it's something like that and brings Fiji onto front foot ball, immediately Wales are going to hit panic stations and they're going to think, right, let's get our defence set. Let's make sure that we are structured still, because that's the one thing. And that's the last thing I want to talk about with Fiji before we move on to Wales, Brandon, is that, like you mentioned there, with Tuisova, he's picked up gold for Fiji in the Olympics. They're well renowned across the world for their abilities to play the 7-a-side game. But it's never quite clicked for them in the 15-a-side game. We saw them at the World Cup and that amazing result where Uruguay managed to get a result on them and managed to beat them. Where do you think the difficulty is for this Fijian side to make that transition? Because like you said, a lot of these players come from the Fiji 7 setup and they come into the 15-a-side setup. And do you think it's that they try and bring too much across from the 7s game and it just doesn't work when there's less space in the 15-a-side game? Or do you think it's more of a tactical reason why they can't sort of duplicate that brilliance that we see on the 7-a-side circuit?
It's a difficult one to say because, as you said, traditionally, we've always known Fiji are going to throw the ball about. They're going to have a smile on their face when they play, but you always used to say, we'll get them at the scrum, though. We'll get them at the line out. Their discipline will cost them. I think under Vern Cotter, I would expect that he'd have got some organisation into them. And, well, you'd hope so anyway, because that's certainly something that he did with Scotland. And he'd have got some discipline from them as well. I remember when we played them in the World Cup in 2019, there were moments in that game where they looked to be on top, especially in the first 20 minutes, if I recall correctly. They were on top early on in that game and really putting the pressure on us, but we, of course, went and won that game. And I think for them, if they can just secure their ball through the scrum, through the line-out, I think then they have the ability in the backs to then go and play some fantastic stuff. I think the other player we have to mention is Mata at 8, playing for Edinburgh. Massive ball carrier, huge ball carrier. He's been brilliant for Edinburgh over the past 2-3 years, and he will look to get them over the gain line. And if you're looking at our back row, it's not the biggest back row we've got. It is not huge. I'm not sure if they're going to challenge at the breakdown at all, but I think that cross between 7s and 15 is a big cross. I do think it's a very different game, a lot less structure, a lot less systems and organisation there. But maybe that's what's needed for Fiji to win this game. There's no point in them trying to match Wales in the way we're going to play. They need to play the way they play with a little bit more organisation. And, they are naturally the best athletes in the world on the rugby scene for sure. So they've got all the tools. And as we mentioned before about the Drua getting Super Rugby, they could be a force to be reckoned with soon.
Yeah, and with Vern Cotter at the helm, he'll be overseeing not only what goes on with Fiji over the coming years, but obviously if he stays within the role, he'll sort of have a supervisionary role with Drua as well. Watching those players coming up and through, those young players that are being given an opportunity. But the team that have been given the task of stopping this Fijian side, this Welsh side, couple of players selected that we might not have been sure of. But I think the one thing that a few people thought might be coming, but not in the way that it did, was with this man's selection. Josh Adams being selected at 13. Not a position, to my knowledge, that he's played before, but it is going to be an interesting opportunity for him. We saw him a lot last week against South Africa, coming off the wing, looking for work, looking for space, whereas on Sunday, it's going to be his responsibility, along with his inside backs, to create the space for Wales to exploit. So when you saw that Josh Adams was playing 13, were you excited? Were you a bit worried? Or were you really confident that this guy could go out and do an absolute number on Sunday?
Well, going forward, he's certainly got the ability to do it. He's physical as well. He's quite a stocky guy, really, and I'm pretty comfortable with his physicality. We always knew Pivac was going to rotate for this game. I'm a little bit surprised to see him there. We do have injury concerns, obviously, in the centres, but there are a few names that pop into my head that potentially feel a little bit hard done by. I would worry for him defensively, maybe. Again, not having played that position is going to be difficult for him, but he's also got a very defensive-minded 12 alongside him in Johnny Williams, and I just want to see him with ball in hand more regularly, which he will get in the centre. When he's out on the wing, it's sometimes against Springboks, he just hardly touched the ball. Same with Louis Rees-Summit. We saw him touch the ball once or twice, and when they did get the ball, they made something happen. So having him have the ball a lot more, hopefully will ensure that he can create more things and he can look to try and beat some Fijian defenders. It's going to be a challenge for him. Again, I'm not sure where this Fijian team is at. I'm not sure how good they're going to be, how they're going to turn up. But Pivac said before, I'm going to rotate, and I think he's known he's going to have this team all set before the autumn started, to be honest. I'd been surprised if he didn't have his team set up. So be interesting to see how he gets on. If it doesn't work, what are the options on the bench? Nick Tompkins, yes. But I'd be surprised if it didn't work against Fiji. Long term, I'm not sure against the bigger boys, but we tried it with North and he did pretty well near the end.
Yeah, and I think he's got to be given the opportunity to do it, And like you said, George North was given the opportunity to move into the centre. And like you said, that big presence, and that swift-footed ability was great at 13 and worked really well, especially at the start of the Six Nations when he got his try against Ireland down at the Principality Stadium. For me, I just love Josh Adams. I love his tenacity. I love his hunger for the ball. I love the way that he puts himself in positions that not all wingers do, like we saw last week. How many wingers in the world do you see coming off the back of the line-out, taking an inside ball back into the South African pack that's coming off the line-out? Very, very few wingers have got the ability to do that. and he's comfortable doing it. He throws himself into these positions. Defensively, he does throw himself into tackles, and there's very few cases where Josh Adams is beaten, and he usually puts in a neutral or a positive tackle where the defender is going backwards. But there is that occasion where you think, at 13, is he going to be exposed? Is he going to be too wide? Thinking, with that winger's mindset, is he going to go too wide? Or is he going to flip the opposite? Is he going to stay too narrow and think, I'm in the centre today, I've got to mark this midfield channel, make sure that I've got my opposite man covered and anything coming inside. So it'll definitely be one that the players around him have to guide. He's got Bigger there. He's got Liam Williams just behind him as well. Cuthbert, who's got a massive experience in terms of international rugby. So he's got to have to use those players to really help him and, structure him. I'm sure Bigger will be screaming the orders at him all afternoon and putting him into those places that he needs to be. But I'm really excited to see how this experiment works. But I think ultimately, and Brandon, I think you agree with me, is that this is going to be an intense game. It's going to be extremely physical. I think we've both agreed the Wales are probably going to keep it quite tight and try and keep as much structure as possible. So therefore, the benches are going to be absolutely vital. And there's one player that I cannot wait to see come off the bench and hopefully earn his first cap. Yep, you've guessed it. Shunza. I absolutely loved when the Wales under-20 Six Nations was on. I watched every single game, and every time this guy got the ball, I could not take my eyes off him. I just love just look at the size. He's 19 years of age, and he looks like someone who's been playing the game for like 20, 30 years. He's just absolutely enormous. And his presence is going to be really important on Sunday when he comes off that bench. Do you think that Pivac will give him a decent run out against this Fijian side, or do you think he'll save him for sort of like the last 5-10 minutes?
It very much depends on how the game's going, to be honest. But I would expect us to be fairly comfortable around 60 minutes. I think he deserves an opportunity. As you said, for the under-20s, has been brilliant, playing down at Exeter, of course. And he's just a fantastic ball carrier. He's going to look to get over the gain line for us. So comfortable with ball in hand. And, that is something in Wales that maybe until the last 5 years or so, we have struggled with our forwards being comfortable with ball in hand, especially our pack, especially the front row. Sorry, maybe not so comfortable on the ball, but he's going to come on. He's young, got nothing to lose. If I was Pivac, I'd say just get on there and just run as hard as you can. Don't worry about what other people tell you. If you get the ball, you see a man in front of you, just run at him. And what an experience for him. Okay, it's not going to be fully sold out, but what a day for him, his family, and a day he'll never forget. So I'm really excited to see what he can do. And, if he is good enough at this level, then we could have a player of his quality for the next 15 years, maybe. So I'm really excited to see how he gets on.
Yeah, 19 years of age. It's just a perfect opportunity to bring him into the fray. And, like you mentioned, Exeter Chief don't just sign any random players. You look at the signings they've made over the last few years. They've kept their group really, really tight. They brought in Stuart Hogg. What a signing to make. They brought in Johnny Gray in the second row. So they're very select in the players that they bring in. And when you saw that they brought in this young Welsh lad, Shunza, you were looking at it thinking, where are they thinking of him? Where's he at the moment? And obviously we didn't get an opportunity to see him really until he took that Welsh jersey in the under-20 Six Nations. And I think it was Ireland, the game that I watched. He's just all arms and legs. When he's running with the ball, he's just so awkward to get hold of and put down. And I think he's just exactly the player that we'll need. Someone with that level of energy, especially late on in the game. And I've got to mention as well, on the bench as well, I like the fact that we've got Thomas Williams and Callum Sheedy coming off the bench as well. Similarly to Shunza, they're going to bring energy, they're going to bring speed to the game, and especially Callum Sheedy. If he can sense an opportunity with a tiring Fijian pack, he's going to take it, and Thomas Williams will not be far away. He's always going to be running that shoulder on the inside. So it does promise, we've got all the ingredients there to take this Fijian side on and really make a good game of it. But ultimately, it comes down to the game on Sunday. However the game is played, fingers crossed, we haven't got another wet Principality Stadium to deal with. Hopefully the weather will stay dry and we can see some nice quality running rugby. But it's that time of the week again, that time where we get our heads together and we think, where is this game going to go and what do we think the result of the game is going to be? So, Brandon, I'll leave it to you first, buddy. Result, how do you think the game's going to go and do you think Wales can get the win?
I think we will win. Yes, I think we'll win. I think we'll try and keep it tight for the first half, especially. I would hope that we would open up a little bit, but I'd be concerned if we open up too much that it gets disorganized, gets all over the place, gets scrappy. What you don't want is 60 minutes into the game, 65 minutes into the game. It's a one-score game. You do not want that. I want us to be sure that we've secured the victory, and then we bring the bench on. I think we will look to use the driving maul quite a bit. I think we will look to kick the ball quite a lot as well. But this Fijian side can certainly hurt us, so we have to pay them the respect that they deserve. I'd expect us to win by 10 to 15 points. I don't think it would be as big a scoreline as people are expecting, but I do expect us to get the win. If not, it'd be 2007 all over again. I don't know if I can deal with that.
Yeah, we can't deal with our heartbreak again. Yeah, I think you're right. I think if Wales keep the game tactical and if Wales keep the game similarly to the game plan they played against South Africa last week, where we looked to put pressure on them as much as possible, I think we could start to rattle them. And, especially if they're going to be trying all these running moves, these offloads and things, if we can shut that down early on and start them questioning themselves, well, where do we go next? This isn't working. That's not working. How are we going to break this Welsh team down? It took the world champion 70 minutes last week to work out the best way to break us down. So we are one of those stubborn sides that are really difficult to get rid of. But I'm with you on this one. I think if we can keep it tight, if we can keep it structured, use the bench well and at the right times, make sure that set piece is as clean as it can be, and keep the mistakes and the discipline. That is going to be massive, that we can keep our discipline far better than we have in the game so far. I am confident that we've got the players and we've got the ability to go out and win this game. I'm going to go a little bit more adventurous than you. I'm going to go 18 to 20 point victory for Wales. Hoping to see some tries. We've watched 160 minutes of rugby so far, and 160 minutes. I thought I'd done my maths wrong then. And we haven't seen a Welsh try yet. So it's got to be, we have seen, Johnny Williams is, but we've got to see some more try scoring for Wales. We've got to see that thing that gets us up out of our seats at home and gets us cheering the boys on. But that's where we're going to leave it for now. Thank you all very much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure. The channel is absolutely soaring at the moment. We just hit 1,000 views on the New Zealand review game. So thank you all so much for your support in the videos as of late. And thank you, Brandon, for your continued support as well, mate. Pleasure to have you on again.
Always a pleasure to be on, mate. And looking forward to the review on Sunday, where hopefully we're talking about a Wales win. I'm confident. I've got to be confident.
Yeah, we've got to be confident. We've got to get behind the boys. So make sure you head over to Brandon's channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm sure he's doing a watch along for the game as well. So head over there, say hello. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button there. And make sure you hit the subscribe button here as well. Almost 94% of the people that are watching these videos are not subscribed yet. So come on. Before this video ends, click out. Hit that subscribe button. Everybody's happy. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. And we will see you on Sunday for the review.